What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. So, is Lindsey Graham in trouble in South Carolina? We're going to take a look. Lindsey Graham is running for Senate. He's an incumbent. He's been there about 22 years. And are people finally done with Lindsey Graham? The latest polling is out, and it looks like this race could be close. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why this matters. So we'll take a look at the Senate map for 2026. And I'll also show you guys a clip from a local news outlet in South Carolina talking about this race. So that's what I want to focus on in this video. But before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about who I am. So I have a political science degree. I've worked in campaigns for over 15 years, and I'm really interested in this topic. So that's why I like to discuss it with you guys on the channel. So if you guys like content like this, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, first thing we're going to do is I want to show you guys a clip. And so we'll watch this clip. This is a local news outlet in South Carolina. They're going to be talking about Lindsey Graham and how close this race could be. And then we're going to take a look at the Senate map, because this is where it gets interesting, because when we're looking at Democrats, do Democrats have a chance to take back control of the Senate in 2026? They have a chance, but right now it's unlikely. But if we start seeing more polling coming out showing some of these different races where we thought it was going to go to a Republican, but now it looks like it could be a toss-up. If we see more of that, then Democrats have a chance to take back the Senate. And I'll show you in the Senate map how they could take back the Senate using South Carolina if they were to win in South Carolina and win in some of these other states. Okay, let's take a look at the clip first, and then we'll talk about it. Here we go.
Well, new polling suggests the race for U.S. Senate here in South Carolina could be tighter in the upcoming midterms than we've seen in years. A generic Democratic candidate trails Senator Lindsey Graham by just 3 points. And our Cameron Lime spoke with political experts about what these early numbers mean. Cameron?
Tessa, these poll numbers are still very early, but experts say they're already revealing. They tell me that this could shape up to be one of the most engaged Senate elections in recent South Carolina history.
But people are going to follow this and ask hard questions about the people who have entered the races.
New public policy poll shows Senator Lindsey Graham leading a generic Democratic candidate by just 3 points. Only 14% of voters surveyed say Graham should be re-elected, and 73% say it's time for someone new. Dr. Mark Owens, a political science professor at the Citadel, says the numbers reflect how closely voters are watching this race. Democratic candidate Dr. Annie Andrews says the results show frustration across the political spectrum.
And this poll tells us that whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, you recognize we need a new voice.
The poll also shows Andrews trailing Graham by nearly 8 points. Voters expressed concerns about Graham's vote to end the Affordable Care Act tax credits, a move that could raise healthcare costs for thousands of South Carolinians. Just 26% approve of his performance on health care. Owen says that level of attention could signal a highly active Senate race.
This is going to be an engaged election. A lot of voters are already paying attention. That's why the candidates expected this. They jumped into the race.
We reached out to Senator Graham's office for comment. He responded, "We are taking nothing for granted and expect Dr. Andrews to run a competitive race." Andrews believes voters are ready for change.
So the 2026 election is going to be unlike any election we've ever experienced in our lifetimes. Anything is possible, and people are ready for a generational change in leaders.
And according to Dr. Owens, one key indicator on how sure an incumbent feels on their seat and in their seat is how much they spend to keep it. The more money they spend on their campaign, the more likely or less likely they are to actually hold that seat.
Okay, so here's a question. So what does that mean for Graham's campaign, and how has his spending been compared to the last time?
Right. Well, it's still far too early right now to tell exactly where they're going to be going for this upcoming election cycle. But we can look back at his race against Jamie Harrison, where both campaigns raised record-breaking amounts. Now, according to the Associated Press, Graham raised about $28 million, which his campaign said was the most ever raised by a Republican Senate candidate in a single quarter in any state. But Democratic challenger Jamie Harrison nearly doubled that total and still came short of flipping the seat. And like we've said, these are still early poll numbers. I can't emphasize that enough. These are very early poll numbers. They often look polarized. polarized, but as we get closer to November, we could see that gap tighten as the race becomes even closer.
All right,
Tessa?
Cam, great work on that. Thank you.
And so you see, early polling is showing that this race could be close. Now, this is early polling, so we don't know exactly how that's going to play out in 2026 in the midterm election. But right now, we're seeing some indicators that could tell us that this is going to be a real tough fight for Lindsey Graham. And so we'll just have to wait to see. But I want to show you, let's go ahead and take a look at the results of Lindsey Graham's last election. Okay, so this was back in 2020. And in this election, we saw it was Harrison was his opponent, the Democrat. And we saw Lindsey Graham win 54.5% of the vote, and then Harrison 44.2%. So you had about a 10-point margin there. Now, if we're looking at the generic ballot, this polling that came out showing that Lindsey Graham only had a lead by 3 points, well, if we see that in 2026, that's going to be a huge shift. That's going to be pretty much a toss-up when we're looking at it. If it's a 3%, that's probably the margin of error. And then also they had Dr. Owens, the candidate that they think will be running against Lindsey Graham. And Lindsey Graham had an 8-point lead over her. So we'll have to see if the race does tighten between her. We don't know if she's going to be the candidate. Obviously, there's going to be a primary. So she's going to have to win the primary in order to go up against Lindsey Graham. But also in that polling, we saw that some people feel that Lindsey Graham needs to go. And this is going to be something that we're probably going to hear more and more about. These politicians need to go. We need new people to come in. Now, understand, Lindsey Graham has been a strong supporter of President Trump. Will he continue to be a strong supporter of President Trump? Because right now, Trump's policies aren't really working. People are still struggling. The economy is not doing well. We're hearing a lot about this affordability crisis. Will Lindsey Graham stick with President Trump and support President Trump, even though President Trump's saying right now the economy is an A++++? Because you know Lindsey Graham is going to be asked that question. How do you think the economy is? Do you agree with President Trump? Do you think it's an A++++? And Lindsey Graham is going to have an answer to that. And if Lindsey Graham says, yes, it's an A++++, guess what? His constituents are going to look at that and say, no, you're not being honest. You're not telling us the truth. And so we'll have to see how it plays out. But when we're looking at races like this, and let me show you the map here. So when we're looking at races like this is why it's important. And so looking at the current map, and this is based on the latest polling, so this is where we are. We have toss-ups at 4. We have Democrats at 45, Democrats and independents at 45, Republicans at 51. Republicans only need 50 seats. If they can win 50 seats, they will maintain control of the Senate. That's why they have a huge advantage, because looking at the latest polling, they're already at 51. And so they don't need to win any more seats, whereas Democrats, they're going to need to run the table. They need to win more seats. They need to net seats. And so looking at this, that's why South Carolina, if South Carolina flips, that will help the Democrats. Now look at this. If we're looking at the toss-up, so we have Georgia as a toss-up, but let's say Democrats were able to win Georgia. North Carolina, Democrats are looking pretty good. Collins is looking good in North Carolina. Let's say Democrats win that. And then Michigan, let's say Democrats win Michigan. And then Maine, Democrats are looking pretty good in Maine. You have 2 Democrats that are looking good, Plattner as well as Mills. And so between the 2 of them, whoever represents the Democrats in Maine, they could beat Collins. And so we could see Maine go blue. And so if we're looking at this, we have Democrats at 49, Republicans at 51. And so now let's look at South Carolina. So we have South Carolina, we have Ohio, we have potentially Iowa, we have potentially Texas. So we have some of these states that could go blue. And Democrats will need to win 2 of those states. So let's say they win Ohio. Okay, the polling in Ohio right now is showing the race very, very close. Let's say Democrats win Ohio. All they need to do is win 1 more of these states that we talked about, South Carolina, Texas, Iowa. And that's just what we're talking about right now. Now, as we learn more and we get closer to the 2026 midterms, closer to November, we could see more polling coming out showing us that some of these other races are tight as well. But let's just say South Carolina flips blue. That's all they need. Democrats would get 51, Republicans would have 49, Democrats would take the majority. Okay. Now, if we are in a 50-50, like I just showed you here, if we did have a 50-50, that goes to Republicans because the vice president will come in and break the tie. So even if it's 50-50, doesn't mean that Democrats and Republicans would be even. Republicans would still have that advantage, and that's why they would need to win one more seat. That's why they would need to win a South Carolina, win an Iowa, win a Texas. And I think South Carolina could be one of those states where you see the Democratic Party put a lot of money into, because if they can upset in South Carolina and beat the incumbent, then guess what? They have a real possibility of taking back control of the Senate in 2026. So I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye. So that's all we have for this video. Make sure if you guys want to send me an email, you can do that, david@thetecshow.com. Like the video, subscribe for more, and check out these videos over here for some more great content. Talk to you later. Bye.